Hey everybody, it's your Mr. Bird here. We are going to go over the Aztecs and Hernan Cortes this week. So hopefully you will like this. So in the 1500s, the Aztec people lived along the Gulf of Mexico, southeast of Native Americans in Texas. Aztecs were fearless warriors who created a huge empire and a group of territories. It's kind of like a group of territories under one ruler. The emperor or the male ruler of the empire was a guy by the name of Montezuma II, also known as just Montezuma. He was the last great emperor of the Aztec Empire and the one who met Hernan Cortes. All right. And so the Aztecs took control of an enemy's land, okay, and they forced people to pay yearly taxes. So essentially, they just basically became overlords and allowed people to live as long as they paid taxes. Warfare was considered a religious duty by the Aztecs, it was part of their religion. Prisoners were taken during the war and they were sacrificed or killed and given as spiritual offerings to their gods. You may have heard of this. A lot of them had their hearts cut out when this occurred. There were many cities and towns in the Aztec Empire, and each was built after defeating an enemy and taking control of the land. So the towns and the cities were put there so that everybody reminded the Aztecs are in charge now. Okay? So the Aztecs designed their own calendar. They built large temples for religious ceremonies. They created beautiful sculptures, which are figures or designs shaped out of clay, marble, or metal. Aztecs were farmers who practiced slash and burn type agriculture on the mainland outside of their city. They chopped down trees and burned the section of the forest and then planted crops in the clearing. All the ashes and stuff that had burned fertilize the soil. So the Aztec farmers would have very fertile soil. In addition to that, they dug canals to irrigate their crops. And then they turned the shallow parts of their lakes into farms by scooping up the mud and piling it on top of each other so it was slightly just above the surface and formed these little islands. And then seeds were planted on those little islands and mud was added regularly to water the crops. Okay. And so when we talk about the next section, it's the arrival of Cortes. Okay, the Hernan Cortes, of course, he was sent from Cuba to the Gulf of Mexico. He was supposed to trade with people he found there and bring enslaved natives back to Cuba. He was given weapons, 16 horsemen and 400 soldiers or foot soldiers for his journey. When his ships landed in Mexico, Hernan Cortes disobeyed the instructions of the Cuban rulers or the viceroy of Cuba, and decided to take control of the empire that he found, the Aztec Empire, and set up his own empire for himself, for his own glory. Okay. When he reached the Aztec Empire, Hernando Cortes was greeted warmly by Montezuma II because they thought he was the second coming of one of their gods, Quetzalcoatl, who was one of their most important gods because he made the corn crops grow. Okay, but Cortes immediately took Montezuma prisoner and held him for ransom. Of course, that's a payment for the emperor's safe return or anyone's safe return, really. And Hernan Cortes's plan fell apart, though, when Montezuma died of an injury during a battle between Cortes's men and the Aztecs who were trying to free Montezuma. Okay, so after the death of the emperor, the Aztecs attacked Cortes and his army one more time. Okay, Cortes fought back. His army formed a circle around the entire city of Tenochtitlan and essentially blockaded it. And the Aztecs were unable to get any food or water, even though their city was in the middle of a lake. They couldn't get a hold of fresh water. Thousands of Aztecs starved to death or died of disease because, of course, the Europeans brought smallpox to the Americas. Okay. After the defeat, Cortes and his army destroyed Tenochtitlan, basically razed it to the ground or destroyed it completely, and then started building Mexico City on top of it. And so Mexico City sits on what used to be, Tenochtitlan, and a large lake called Lake Texcoco. Okay, and so let me move myself out of the way here. I'll go up there. Yeah, there I am. So Hernando Cortez's defeat of the Aztec Empire brought about four important things for the Spanish Empire. Number one, it gave Spain control over the lands it needed to expand the empire and get more raw materials for Spain, as well as riches, so they could finance all their wars in the European continent. It gave them this certainty, or this very big sense of entitlement, that Spain was absolutely sure that the Americas were theirs to take, and it was theirs to have because God wanted them to, because they were the right people to have it. This is actually a recurring theme in history. Then it also gave them lots of riches, the gold and treasures that I mentioned earlier that helped finance the wars on the European continent. And they would also bolster Spain's wealth and power. But in contrast to that, they would also cause a massive inflation, as there was way too much gold and silver being shipped from the Americas into Europe. So it devaluated the metals lost value. The last thing it gave them was power. It was just a matter of time before Spain controlled the whole world, is what the Spanish rulers thought. We were going to be the rulers of the entire world. France and England just get out of the way. Okay? And so when you look at it, it's over here, and I'll move myself out of the way again. Right up here, you see what becomes New Spain. And this is New Mexico over here. And of course, this is Baja California, and it's actually at this point politically joined to California itself. Okay, over here is Louisiana, which the French own. Over here are the Carolinas that are going to become the 13 colonies, and of course out here is Cuba. So this is kind of the world as we see it at the point at which Cortes takes over the area that used to be the Aztec Empire and begins to expand northward and southward. And so this will, ladies and gentlemen, be continued next week when we talk about a few more explorers. Thank you very much.